The gunshots echoed through the canyon walls like thunder, sending flocks of startled birds into the crimson Arizona sunset. Josephine Edwards clutched her mother's cameo brooch to her chest as the stagecoach lurched violently, the horses' panicked whinnies cutting through the cacophony of splintering wood and men's shouts. This was supposed to be a fresh start in Gila City, not her final journey on this earth. Blood spattered across her pale blue traveling dress as the banker seated across from her took a bullet to the chest, his eyes wide with shock before the life drained from them. The elderly couple beside her had already fallen silent, their bodies slumped against each other in death's embrace. The driver's voice had gone quiet minutes ago. "Nobody move," a gruff voice commanded from outside the coach. "Hand over the strongbox and nobody else gets hurt." Josephine pressed herself against the floor of the coach, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain the bandits would hear it. The smell of gunpowder and blood filled her nostrils as she fought to remain conscious. 22 years of life in Boston hadn't prepared her for this savagery. "There's a woman still alive in there," another voice called out. "What do we do with her?" A pause then. "No witnesses." "You know the rules." Josephine's breath caught in her throat. She closed her eyes, silently praying to a God she wasn't certain was listening. The footsteps approached, boots crunching on the rocky ground. She thought of her parents back east, how they'd objected to her taking the teaching position in the Arizona territory. They'd been right after all. The coach door creaked open. Josephine kept her eyes shut tight, pretending to be among the dead, though her trembling likely gave her away. She heard the metallic click of a revolver being cocked. "Aw hell, I can't do it," the man muttered. "She ain't seen our faces." "You going soft, Jenkins," came the reply from outside. "Take the strongbox and let's go. The law'll be on our trail soon enough." More footsteps, the sound of horses whinnying, and then gradually fading hoofbeats as the bandits rode away with their bounty. Josephine remained frozen, afraid to move, to breathe, to believe she'd been spared. Minutes passed like hours until the desert silence enveloped her completely. Only then did she dare to open her eyes, finding herself surrounded by the vacant stares of her fellow passengers. The reality of her situation crashed down on her with crushing weight. She was alone in the middle of the desert, miles from civilization, with night approaching and nothing but a small carpetbag of possessions. Josephine pushed the stagecoach door open with trembling hands and stepped out onto the dusty ground. Her legs gave way immediately, and she collapsed into the dirt, violent sobs racking her body. Blood stained her gloves, her dress, even her hair. 4 people dead, and she alone had survived. When her tears finally subsided, Josephine looked around at the desolate landscape. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, with no sign of habitation. The dying sunlight cast long shadows across the desert floor, and in the distance, she heard the mournful howl of a coyote. Night in the desert meant predators both animal and human. Rising on shaky legs, Josephine retrieved her carpetbag from the coach. She couldn't stay here with the dead. She needed to find shelter, water, safety. The driver had mentioned they were about an hour's ride from the next station. Perhaps she could walk it before complete darkness fell. She'd taken no more than 20 paces when the sound of approaching hoofbeats froze her in place. Terror seized her once more had the bandits returned to finish what they'd started. With nowhere to hide on the open road, Josephine stood rooted to the spot, clutching her bag like a shield. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the setting sun. As he drew closer, Josephine could make out his broad shoulders, the Stetson hat shading his face, and the gleam of a silver star pinned to his vest. Not a bandit, then, but could she trust him? The horseman slowed as he approached the wreckage, his expression grim as he surveyed the scene. When his eyes finally fell on Josephine, they widened in surprise. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and steady as he dismounted in one fluid motion. "Are you hurt?" Josephine couldn't find her voice. Now that rescue seemed at hand, the shock of what she'd endured hit her anew. Her knees buckled, and the stranger moved with surprising speed to catch her before she hit the ground. Strong arms enfolded her, and she found herself looking up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face framed by dark hair. "You're safe now," the cowboy said, his voice gentle yet firm. "I'm Deputy Isaac Porter. I'll get you somewhere safe." The world spun around Josephine, and as consciousness slipped away, she had one final thought. She'd survived, but at what cost? When Josephine awoke, she was in an unfamiliar bed, clean sheets tucked around her. For one blissful moment, she thought perhaps the stagecoach massacre had been merely a nightmare. Then the pain in her body reminded her otherwise. She was in a small, plain room with whitewashed walls. Sunlight streamed through a window with simple curtains. Her traveling clothes were gone, replaced by a cotton nightgown she didn't recognize. The realization that someone had undressed her brought a flush to her cheeks. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of an older woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled into a bun. "Oh good, you're awake," the woman said, carrying in a tray with a steaming cup. "I'm Martha Johnson. You're in my boarding house in Gila City." "How long have I been asleep?" Josephine asked, her voice raspy with disuse. "Nearly 2 days, poor dear. Deputy Porter brought you in looking half dead." "You've been through a terrible ordeal." The memories came flooding back, the gunshots, the blood, the bodies. Josephine's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a sob. There, Martha soothed, setting down the tray and sitting beside her on the bed. "You're safe now. The deputy's been checking on you regular-like. He'll want to know you're awake. The others." Josephine whispered. Martha's face grew solemn. "I'm afraid you were the only one who survived. The deputy and some men went back for the bodies. They've been properly laid to rest in our cemetery." Tears slid down Josephine's cheeks. "I don't understand why they let me live." "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Martha said, patting her hand. "Now drink this tea. It'll help restore your strength." Josephine sipped the tea obediently, though she could barely taste it. "My belongings." "Your carpet bag is right there," Martha pointed to the corner. "And that pretty brooch you were clutching is in the drawer beside you. Deputy Porter made sure everything was kept safe." "Deputy Porter," Josephine repeated. "He saved my life." Martha nodded. "Isaac is a good man. One of the best in these parts. He's been riding out every day trying to track those bandits." "I need to thank him," Josephine said, attempting to rise, only to find her limbs weak and uncooperative. "You need to rest," Martha countered firmly. "There'll be plenty of time for thanks when you're stronger. Besides, he said he'd be by this evening to check on you." Josephine relented, sinking back against the pillows. "I was coming here to be the new school teacher." Martha's face brightened. "Is that so?" "Well, the whole town's been waiting on your arrival. The children have been without proper schooling since Miss Pemberton left to get married last spring." "I don't know if I can stay now," Josephine admitted. "After what happened." "Nonsense," Martha said briskly. "This is exactly why you should stay. Show those outlaws they didn't break your spirit. Besides, those children need you." The older woman's matter-of-fact attitude was strangely comforting. Perhaps she was right. Running back to Boston with her tail between her legs wouldn't erase what had happened. "I'll think about it," Josephine promised. "Good girl. Now rest some more. I'll bring you some proper food in a bit." After Martha left, Josephine found herself restless despite her physical weakness. She managed to slide out of bed and make her way to the window. Gila City stretched before her, a single dusty main street lined with wooden buildings, a far cry from Boston's cobblestone and brick. Men on horseback, women in practical frontier dresses, and children playing in the dirt. This was to be her new home. Her eyes were drawn to a tall figure emerging from a building with sheriff painted above the door. Even from a distance, she recognized Deputy Porter's confident stride. He paused to speak with a townsman, gesturing emphatically. Whatever news he delivered caused the other man to shake his head gravely. As if sensing her gaze, the deputy suddenly looked up toward her window. Josephine stepped back instinctively, her heart racing inexplicably. There was something about Isaac Porter that unsettled her, not in a frightening way, but in a manner that made her acutely aware of herself as a woman. She'd come west for independence, for adventure, for purpose, not for romance. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for the first man who showed her kindness. Besides, he was merely doing his job. Saving damsels in distress was likely routine for a lawman in the territories. Josephine returned to bed, exhaustion overtaking her once more. As she drifted into sleep, however, she couldn't quite banish the memory of those piercing blue eyes and the deep voice that had promised her safety. The sound of male voices woke her some hours later. Darkness had fallen, and someone had lit the oil lamp beside her bed. Josephine could hear Martha's cheerful tone mingling with a deeper register that made her pulse quicken. The door opened, and Martha peeked in. "Are you up for a visitor, dear? Deputy Porter is here." Before Josephine could answer, Martha had already stepped aside, revealing the tall figure of the lawman. He'd removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, evidence of years squinting against the desert sun. "Miss Edwards," he greeted her, his voice softer than she remembered. "It's good to see you awake." "Deputy Porter," Josephine replied, suddenly conscious of her appearance. She raised a hand self-consciously to her tangled hair. "I want to thank you for saving my life." "I'll leave you two to talk," Martha said with a barely concealed smile, closing the door behind her. Isaac Porter remained standing awkwardly near the door, as if uncertain of the propriety of being alone with her. "I'm just glad I found you when I did. Those desert nights get mighty cold." "Please sit," Josephine gestured to the chair beside her bed. "Mrs. Johnson tells me you've been searching for the men who attacked the stagecoach." The deputy settled into the chair, his large frame making it seem small by comparison. "Yes, madam. I've been tracking them, but they're headed into the mountains. Makes the trail harder to follow." Did you know any of the others? The ones who died?" she asked quietly. A shadow passed over his face. "I did. Mr. and Mrs. Hollister were good folks, lived here 15 years. He ran the general store. The banker, Mr. Phillips, was newer to town but well respected. And Jim Thompson was one of our best stagecoach drivers." He paused. "I'm sorry you had to witness such brutality, Miss Edwards." "Call me Josephine, please," she said impulsively. After sharing such a traumatic connection, formality seemed unnecessary. A small smile touched his lips. "Josephine, then, and I'm Isaac." "Isaac," she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her tongue. "Will you tell me what happened after I fainted?" He nodded, settling back in the chair. "I carried you to my horse and brought you straight to town. Doc Miller checked you over Mrs. Johnson helped with that part and said you were suffering from shock and exposure but otherwise unharmed. I organized a party to retrieve the others and the coach. The bandits took a strongbox," Josephine recalled. "That seemed to be what they were after." Isaac's expression hardened. "Gold shipment bound for the bank. They knew exactly when it was coming through. Makes me think they had inside information." You suspect someone in town, he shrugged. Can't rule it out. This gang has hit 3 stagecoaches in the past 2 months. Always seem to know which ones are carrying valuables. Josephine's mind raced. I didn't see their faces clearly. They wore bandanas, but one of them couldn't bring himself to kill me. He called the other one Jenkins, I think. Isaac leaned forward, suddenly alert. Jenkins. You're sure that's the name you heard? She nodded. Yes. Why? Do you know him? There's a Luke Jenkins who used to work at the livery here before he disappeared about 3 months ago. Isaac stood abruptly, pacing the small room. This could be the break we've been looking for. Watching him, Josephine felt a sense of purpose returning. Perhaps she had survived for a reason to help bring these men to justice. I want to help, she said firmly, if there's anything I can do. Isaac turned to look at her, his expression softening. You've done plenty already, Josephine. That name is more than we've had to go on before. He paused, then added, the town's been talking about you, the brave new schoolteacher who survived against all odds. Brave, she echoed. I hid. I pretended to be dead. There was nothing brave about it. Surviving takes courage too, he said quietly. And from what I hear, you've still got plans to stay and teach our children, despite everything. That's the kind of bravery we respect out here. His words warmed something inside her. I haven't decided yet, she admitted, but I'm considering it. Good, Isaac said, a genuine smile transforming his serious face. We need people like you in Gila City. Their eyes met, and for a moment Josephine felt as if he could see straight through to her soul. Then he cleared his throat, reaching for his hat. I should let you rest. Is there anything you need? Just answers, she replied honestly, and perhaps, would you come again tomorrow? I might remember more details that could help. I'll be back, he promised, settling his hat on his head. Try to sleep well, Josephine. After he left, Josephine found herself replaying their conversation. There had been something in his eyes when he looked at her, something that suggested his interest might extend beyond his official duties. The thought should have alarmed her. She'd come west to establish herself as an independent woman, not to fall under the protection of a man. And yet, as she drifted back to sleep, it was Isaac Porter's voice promising her safety that followed her into her dreams. Over the next few days, Josephine's strength returned gradually. Martha Johnson proved to be a nurturing yet practical caretaker, ensuring Josephine ate well and began taking short walks around the boarding house to rebuild her stamina. True to his word, Isaac visited daily. Sometimes his visits were brief, just a few minutes to inquire after her health and update her on the search for the bandits. Other times, particularly in the evenings, he would stay longer, sitting with her on the small porch as the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. During these quiet moments, Josephine learned about the man behind the badge. Isaac had come to Arizona Territory from Missouri after the war, seeking a fresh start like so many others. He'd been deputy in Gila City for 5 years and knew every resident by name. He spoke of the town with obvious affection, describing the tight-knit community with pride. "What about your family?" she asked one evening as they watched the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon. "Do they remain in Missouri?" A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my pa to the war. Ma remarried and moved to California with my younger sister. We write, but I haven't seen them in years." "You must get lonely sometimes," Josephine observed. His blue eyes met hers. "I've got my duties, the people here, it's enough." He paused. "Or it was until recently." The implication hung in the air between them, unacknowledged but undeniable. Josephine found herself both drawn to and wary of the connection developing between them. She'd known Isaac Porter less than a week, yet he already occupied an outsized place in her thoughts. "Tell me about Boston," he said, deftly changing the subject. "What made you leave it all behind for our dusty little town?" Josephine smiled, grateful for the shift. "I wanted more than the life laid out for me there. My parents expected me to make a suitable marriage, host tea parties, and produce grandchildren. Teaching was acceptable only until I found a husband." "And that didn't appeal to you?" Isaac asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Not the way it was presented." As if my own dreams and ambitions meant nothing. She smoothed her skirt, choosing her words carefully. "I don't object to marriage or family, but I wanted to build something of my own first, to know I could stand on my own 2 feet. Isaac nodded slowly. "Out here, people respect capability above all else. Man or woman, if you can contribute, you're valued." "That's precisely why I came," Josephine said. "When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Gila City, it felt like an opportunity to prove myself." "And now," he asked, "after what happened, do you still want to stay?" It was the question she'd been wrestling with since regaining consciousness. The trauma of the stagecoach attack still haunted her dreams, but returning east felt like surrendering. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with her certainty. "I think I do. The school term is scheduled to begin in 2 weeks. I should start preparing." The smile that spread across Isaac's face made her heart flutter. "That's fine news, Josephine. The children will be lucky to have you." The next morning, Josephine asked Martha to show her the schoolhouse. They walked arm in arm down Gila City's Main Street, with Martha proudly pointing out the various establishments: the general store, temporarily closed following Mr. Hollister's death, the blacksmith shop, the small church, and finally, at the edge of town, the schoolhouse. It was a simple one-room building with a small bell tower. Inside, rows of benches faced a teacher's desk on a raised platform. A blackboard hung on the wall behind it. The windows were clean but bare, and the whole place had the musty smell of a space too long unoccupied. "It needs a woman's touch," Martha declared, "but it's sound. Mr. Johnson built it himself when the town first decided they needed proper schooling for the children." Josephine walked to the teacher's desk, running her fingers along its scarred wooden surface. She could see herself here, guiding young minds, building a life of her own making. "How many students will I have?" she asked. "About 20, ranging from 6 to 16, Martha replied. "Some of the ranch children ride in daily, others board in town during the week." "And my living arrangements?" Josephine had been so focused on recovery, she hadn't considered practical matters. "There's a small cottage behind the schoolhouse for the teacher," Martha explained. "It's nothing fancy, but it's private. Though you're welcome to stay at the boarding house as long as you like," she added hastily. Josephine smiled. "I appreciate that, but I think having my own space would be best. When can I see the cottage?" The cottage proved to be a snug 2-room affair with basic furnishings. A combined sitting room and kitchen occupied the front, with a small bedroom at the back. It needed cleaning and personalization, but Josephine could already envision making it her own. "It's perfect," she declared. Martha beamed. "I'll help you get it ready. And I'm sure Deputy Porter wouldn't mind lending a hand with any repairs needed." Josephine felt her cheeks warm at the mention of Isaac. "Mrs. Johnson, I hope you're not getting ideas about the deputy and me. He was simply doing his duty." The older woman's knowing smile suggested otherwise. "Of course, dear. Though I will say, in the 5 years Isaac Porter has lived in this town, I've never seen him visit anyone sick as faithfully as he visited yours." Before Josephine could formulate a response, a commotion from the direction of the main street caught their attention. Raised voices and the sound of horses moving at speed broke the morning quiet. "Something's happening," Martha said, her expression concerned. "We should head back." They hurried toward the center of town, where a crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office. Pushing through, Josephine spotted Isaac dismounting from his horse, his expression grim. Beside him, another rider was bringing in a second horse with a body draped over the saddle. "We found Jenkins," Isaac announced to the sheriff, a grizzled older man with a silver mustache. "Shot in the back, about 10 miles north in the foothills." The sheriff spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Looks like his partners decided to tie up loose ends." Isaac nodded, then caught sight of Josephine in the crowd. His expression softened momentarily before he turned back to his superior. "We should organize a larger posse, Sheriff. They can't be far." "I'll round up some men," the sheriff agreed. "We'll head out within the hour." As the crowd dispersed, Isaac made his way to Josephine and Martha. "You shouldn't be seeing this," he said quietly to Josephine. "You've witnessed enough violence already." "Was that the man who couldn't bring himself to kill me?" Josephine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Isaac nodded grimly. "Appears his associates didn't appreciate his moment of conscience." "Are you riding out with the posse?" Martha asked. "I have to," Isaac confirmed. "These men are dangerous. They've killed 5 people now, including their own." Josephine felt a cold knot of fear form in her stomach. "Please be careful." Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, surprise perhaps at her concern. "I always am. But I'll be extra vigilant knowing I've got someone waiting for my return." The boldness of his statement left Josephine momentarily speechless. Before she could respond, Isaac tipped his hat to both women and strode back toward the sheriff's office. "Well," Martha said with a barely suppressed smile, "I believe that answers the question of whether the deputy has ideas about you, Miss Edwards." Josephine couldn't deny the flutter of pleasure she felt at Isaac's words, but concern quickly overshadowed it. Those men are killers. "What if something happens to him?" Martha patted her arm reassuringly. "Isaac Porter knows these mountains better than most, and he's not a man to take foolish risks." She guided Josephine away from the crowd. "Come, let's get you back to the boarding house. You've had enough excitement for one day." But as they walked, Josephine found herself glancing back toward the sheriff's office, where men were gathering with rifles and provisions. Among them, Isaac stood tall, his presence commanding even from a distance. In just a few days, he had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. "God keep him safe," she whispered to herself, a prayer and a wish combined. The posse departed within the hour, 12 men riding north into the foothills where Jenkins' body had been discovered. Josephine watched from the boarding house window, her heart constricting as Isaac disappeared from view. The next 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. To distract herself, Josephine threw herself into preparations for the school term. She cleaned the schoolhouse from top to bottom, arranged the few available books, and began planning lessons. In the evenings, she and Martha worked on making her cottage habitable, scrubbing floors and hanging curtains sewn from fabric purchased at the general store, now reopened under the management of Mrs. Hollister's nephew. Word spread through town that the new schoolteacher was settling in, and soon parents began stopping by to introduce themselves and their children. Josephine found herself welcomed with open arms by the community, their genuine warmth helping to ease the lingering trauma of her arrival. But always, her thoughts returned to Isaac and the posse. Each day brought rumors but no solid news. Some said they were closing in on the bandits, others claimed the trail had gone cold. The uncertainty wore on Josephine's nerves, though she tried to hide her anxiety. On the 4th day, as Josephine was arranging her meager belongings in the cottage, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking out the window, her heart leaped at the sight of Isaac dismounting in front of her door. His clothes were dusty, His face stubbled with several days' growth of beard, but he was whole and unharmed. She rushed outside, propriety forgotten in her relief. "You're back." Isaac removed his hat, his blue eyes weary but brightening at the sight of her. "We are. Thought you might want to know what happened." "Please come in," she invited, suddenly conscious of neighbors who might be watching their reunion. Inside the cottage, Isaac looked around with approval. "You've made this place look mighty fine in a short time." "Martha helped," Josephine said, gesturing for him to sit at her small table. "You must be exhausted. Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be welcome, if it's not too much trouble," he replied, lowering his tall frame onto the chair. Josephine busied herself at the stove, grateful for the chance to compose herself. His mere presence in her home sent her pulse racing in a most unladylike manner. "Did you find them?" she asked over her shoulder. "The men who attacked the stagecoach," Isaac sighed heavily. "We tracked them into the Superstition Mountains, lost their trail in rocky terrain, but we know who they are now, the Blackwell gang. They've been terrorizing stagecoaches and trains across 3 territories." She brought him a steaming cup of coffee, then sat across from him. "So they got away." "For now," he conceded, taking a grateful sip. "But we've sent telegrams to every lawman within 100 miles. Their descriptions, their names. They won't find it easy to continue operating." "I'm sorry you couldn't bring them to justice," Josephine said softly. Isaac's expression hardened. "It's only a matter of time. Men like that eventually make mistakes." His eyes met hers. "But I am glad to report that the gold they stole was recovered." "Truly?" Josephine leaned forward in surprise. He nodded. "Found it buried near their last campsite. Guess they plan to come back for it once the heat died down." "That's wonderful news for the bank," Josephine said. "And for the town." "It is," Isaac agreed, then fell silent, studying her face. "You look better, stronger. The schoolhouse, too. Martha says you've been working non-stop." "It gives me purpose," Josephine explained. "Helps keep the memories at bay." Understanding filled his eyes. "Do you still have nightmares?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Not every night now, but yes." "It gets easier," he said gently. "With time. I still dream about things I saw during the war sometimes, but the dreams come less often now." The personal admission touched her deeply. "Thank you for telling me that. It helps to know I'm not alone in this." "You're not alone, Josephine," Isaac said, his voice dropping lower. "Not in any way that matters." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. This was moving beyond the bounds of propriety, beyond the natural gratitude a survivor might feel toward her rescuer. Yet Josephine couldn't bring herself to pull back. "Isaac," she began, uncertain what she meant to say. He seemed to collect himself, finishing his coffee and standing abruptly. "I should let you get back to your preparations. School starts soon, doesn't it?" "Monday," she confirmed, rising as well. Will you come to the opening day?" "Many parents will be there. It would lend an official presence." His smile returned, warming his tired features. "I wouldn't miss it, but I hope to see you before then. Perhaps Sunday, after church, I could show you some of the countryside around Gila City if you'd like." "I'd like that very much," Josephine replied, perhaps too quickly. At the door, Isaac paused, hat in hand. "It's good to be back, Josephine. Riding out there, I kept thinking about." He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "About the town, about the future we're all building here." She sensed there was more he wanted to say, but something held him back. "Get some rest, Isaac. You've earned it." He nodded, settling his hat on his head. "I'll see you Sunday then." As she watched him walk away, Josephine acknowledged to herself what she'd been trying to deny: she was falling for Deputy Isaac Porter. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. She'd come west to establish her independence, not to lose her heart to the first man who showed her kindness. And yet, Was it possible to be both independent and in love? To build her own life while also opening it to someone else? These were questions she'd never considered in her sheltered Boston upbringing, where marriage was presented as a woman's sole purpose. Closing the door, Josephine returned to unpacking her belongings. Among them was a small daguerreotype of her parents, their expressions serious as the photographer had required. She gazed at their faces, wondering what they would think of her now, of the life she was creating in this dusty frontier town, of the man who increasingly occupied her thoughts. "I'm still the daughter you raised," she told their images softly, "but I'm becoming someone new as well. Someone stronger. And perhaps," she thought as she placed the picture on her small mantel, "someone brave enough to follow her heart wherever it might lead." Sunday dawned clear and bright, the October air crisp with the promise of autumn even as the Arizona sun retained its warmth. Josephine dressed with particular care in her best dress, a deep blue that complemented her eyes, and pinned her mother's cameo brooch at her throat. The small church was filled to capacity when she arrived with Martha. It seemed the entire population of Gila City had turned out, partly for worship and partly, Josephine suspected, to get a look at the new schoolteacher who had survived such an ordeal. Isaac was already seated near the back. He stood when he saw them, offering his place to Martha while he moved to sit beside Josephine. In his Sunday best, a clean black suit and string tie, he cut a striking figure, his usually tousled dark hair neatly combed. "You look lovely," he whispered as the congregation rose for the first hymn. Throughout the service, Josephine was acutely aware of Isaac beside her. Their shoulders occasionally brushed, sending an almost electric current through her. When the congregation knelt for prayer, his large hand found hers briefly, giving it a reassuring squeeze. After the service, it seemed everyone in town wanted to speak with Josephine. Parents introduced children who would be her students. Women invited her to join sewing circles and social gatherings. Men offered to help with any repairs the schoolhouse might need. Through it all, Isaac remained nearby, his presence both protective and proud. "I think they approve of their new teacher," he commented when they finally extricated themselves from the crowd. "They've been wonderfully welcoming," Josephine agreed. "I only hope I can live up to their expectations." "You will," he said with such conviction that she couldn't help but believe him. "Now, are you ready for that ride I promised?" Isaac had arranged for a gentle mare from the livery stable, correctly guessing that Josephine's riding experience was limited to occasional outings in Boston's parks. He was patient as she adjusted to the western saddle, showing her how to hold the reins properly and how to guide the horse with subtle pressure from her legs. They rode out of town at a leisurely pace, following the Gila River where it curved away from the settlement. The landscape opened up before them, vast, harsh, and breathtakingly beautiful. Rocky outcroppings rose against the brilliant blue sky, and in the distance, mountains shimmered in the heat haze. "It's so different from Massachusetts," Josephine marveled. "Everything is bigger, more dramatic." "Some find it too harsh," Isaac said, watching her reaction. "Too unforgiving." "I find it honest," she replied thoughtfully. "The land doesn't pretend to be something it's not. There's beauty in that directness." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That's how I've always felt about it. Like the territory strips away pretense, leaves only what's real and true." They rode until they reached a small grove of cottonwoods beside the river, where Isaac suggested they stop to rest. He helped Josephine dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. From his saddlebags, he produced a simple picnic bread, cheese, dried apples, and a small jug of cool water. They sat in the dappled shade, the gentle murmur of the river providing a soothing backdrop to their conversation. "Tell me about your dreams, Josephine," Isaac said as they finished their meal. "Beyond teaching in Gila City, what do you want from life?" The question caught her by surprise. Few men in her experience had ever expressed interest in a woman's aspirations. "I want to make a difference," she said slowly, considering her words. "To help shape the future through the children I teach. Perhaps someday to start a proper academy here with multiple teachers and advanced subjects." She paused. "And I want a home of my own, not just a house but a true home filled with books and music and love." The last word emerged almost against her will. She glanced at Isaac, finding his gaze intent upon her face. "And what about you?" she asked, deflecting attention from her revelation. "What are your dreams, Deputy Porter?" He leaned back against a tree trunk, his expression thoughtful. "For years, my dream was simple: to keep the peace, to help build a community worth protecting." A smile touched his lips. "The sheriff's getting on in years. He's hinted he'll recommend me as his replacement when he retires." "Sheriff Porter," Josephine tested the title. "It suits you." "Maybe," he acknowledged. "But lately, I've been thinking there might be more to life than just the badge." His eyes found hers. "Family, perhaps. A home that's more than just a place to sleep between patrols." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Josephine's heart hammered in her chest as Isaac moved closer, his hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. "Josephine," he said, his voice low and rough with emotion. "I know it's too soon. We've known each other barely 2 weeks, but I can't deny what I'm feeling." She should stop this, Josephine knew. Propriety demanded it. She had come west to establish her independence, not to fall into a hasty romance. And yet, as Isaac's face drew nearer to hers, she found herself leaning toward him, drawn by a force as natural and inevitable as gravity itself. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively, almost questioningly, before deepening into something more certain. His hand slid to the nape of her neck, cradling her head with surprising gentleness for such strong hands. Josephine's fingers gripped the front of his shirt, anchoring herself against the tide of sensation washing over her. When they finally drew apart, both were breathing unevenly. Isaac rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I've been wanting to do that since I found you on that road," he confessed. "Even covered in dust and nearly unconscious, you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen." A laugh escaped Josephine, breaking the tension. "That doesn't say much for your taste, Deputy." His eyes opened, serious despite her attempt at levity. "I saw your courage first. The beauty was just a bonus." The sincerity in his voice humbled her. "Isaac, I don't know what to say. This is all happening so fast." "I know," he agreed, taking her hands in his. "And I'm not asking for any promises. Just a chance. Time to see where this might lead." It was reasonable, Josephine thought. Far more reasonable than the wild impulse she'd felt to throw caution to the wind and embrace whatever future might include this man. "I think I can agree to that," she said softly. "Time and a chance." The relief and joy that spread across his face warmed her to her core. He helped her to her feet, gathering their picnic things before assisting her back onto her horse. As they rode back toward town, side by side in companionable silence, Josephine felt a contentment she hadn't expected to find so soon after the trauma of the stagecoach attack. Whatever happened between her and Isaac, she knew with sudden clarity that coming to Gila City had been the right decision. Here, amid the harsh beauty of the Arizona territory, she was finding not just independence, but perhaps something equally valuable: a place to truly belong. The first day of school arrived with all the excitement and nervous energy Josephine had anticipated. She stood at the door of the freshly cleaned schoolhouse, welcoming each student by name. She had memorized the enrollment list Martha had provided and directing them to seats appropriate for their ages. By 9 o'clock, 22 children ranging from 6 to 16 had filled the benches. Parents lingered at the back of the room, curious to see the new teacher in action. Among them, Josephine spotted Isaac, standing tall in his deputy's attire, his presence lending an air of official approval to the proceedings. "Good morning," Josephine began, her voice clear and steady despite her nerves. "I am Miss Edwards, and I am honored to be your teacher. Together, we will explore the wonders of arithmetic, history, science, and literature. But first, I'd like to learn a bit about each of you." She proceeded with an activity designed to put the children at ease, asking each to stand and share their name, age, and one thing they hope to learn this year. The responses ranged from practical, how to cipher well enough to help Pa with the ranch accounts, to ambitious, all about the presidents and the Constitution, to endearingly honest, how to write my name prettier than my brother. By the time she divided the students into groups for their first lessons, the initial awkwardness had dissipated. The younger children worked on their letters while the older ones tackled arithmetic problems. Josephine moved between groups, offering guidance and encouragement. When noon arrived, she dismissed the children for their midday meal. Many would return to homes in town, while others had brought food to eat in the schoolyard. As the room emptied, the parents came forward to offer their impressions. "You've got a natural way with the little ones, Mrs. Rodriguez commented, her dark eyes warm with approval. "My Miguel usually hides behind me when meeting strangers, but he went right to you." "Thank you," Josephine replied, genuinely touched. "They're wonderful children." One by one, the parents expressed their satisfaction before departing, until only Isaac remained. He approached her desk, his expression impossible to read. "Well, Deputy Porter," Josephine said, suddenly shy under his scrutiny, "what verdict does the law render on Gila City's new teacher?" A slow smile spread across his face. "The law is mighty impressed, Miss Edwards. You had them eating out of your hand within minutes." "I wouldn't go that far," she demurred. "But it was a good start." "Better than good," he insisted. "The whole town will be singing your praises by sundown." His confidence in her abilities warmed Josephine deeply. "Will you stay for the afternoon session?" "Wish I could," Isaac said regretfully. "But duty calls. Sheriff's got me riding out to the Clayton Ranch. There's been trouble with cattle rustlers." Concern flickered across Josephine's face. "Be careful." "Always am," he assured her, then glanced around to confirm they were alone before adding in a lower voice, "I was hoping to call on you properly this evening if you'd allow it." The formal request, so at odds with the passionate kiss they'd shared just yesterday, brought a smile to Josephine's lips. "I would welcome your call, Deputy." His answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I'll be at your cottage at 7 then." The afternoon session went as smoothly as the morning, and by the time Josephine rang the bell to end the school day, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what she had come west to accomplish. The faces of her students, bright with curiosity and new knowledge, confirmed that her decision had been right. After the last child departed, Josephine lingered in the schoolhouse, organizing materials for the next day and reflecting on the successes and challenges of her first day. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the footsteps until a shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she expected to see Isaac, perhaps returned early from his duties. Instead, she found herself facing a stranger, a tall, lean man with cold eyes and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Something about his stance sent a chill of recognition through her. "Miss Edwards," the man said, his voice triggering a memory that froze the blood in her veins. It was the same voice that had ordered no witnesses after the stagecoach robbery. "School's dismissed for the day," Josephine managed to say, her mouth suddenly dry. "If you're looking for one of the students, I ain't looking for no student," the man interrupted, taking a step closer. "I'm looking for you, the woman who saw too much and lived to tell about it." Josephine rose from her chair, instinctively backing toward the door. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man's laugh was devoid of humor. "Sure you do. You're the only survivor of that stage robbery 2 weeks back, the one who could identify me and my boys." His hand moved to his hip where a revolver hung in its holster. "Jenkins getting soft cost us all. Now I gotta finish what he couldn't." "You're making a mistake," Josephine said, her mind racing for a way to escape. "I never saw any faces clearly. The bandits all wore masks." "Maybe so," the man conceded, "but you heard names. Jenkins' name. And now the law's got descriptions of all of us circulating through the territory." He drew his gun with frightening speed. "Can't let you keep talking, Miss Schoolteacher." Josephine's eyes darted to the door, but the man stood between her and escape. The windows were too small for her to climb through quickly. She was trapped. "They'll know it was you," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Everyone in town saw you come in here." The man shrugged. "By the time they find your body, I'll be long gone." He raised the gun. "Any last words, madam?" Before Josephine could respond, the schoolhouse door burst open. Isaac stood framed in the doorway, his own weapon already drawn. "Drop it, Blackwell," he commanded, his voice hard as steel. The outlaw's reaction was instantaneous. He swung his gun toward the new threat, firing wildly. Isaac dove to the side, returning fire with deadly accuracy. The outlaw staggered, clutching his chest, then crumpled to the floor. In the sudden, ringing silence that followed the gunshots, Josephine found herself unable to move, shock rendering her immobile. Then Isaac was at her side, his free arm encircling her as his eyes rapidly assessed her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "Josephine, talk to me." "I'm not hit," she managed, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "How did you know?" Clayton Ranch was quiet, Isaac explained, holstering his weapon. "On my way back, I saw Blackwell enter town, recognized him from the descriptions we'd gathered." His arms tightened around her. "When I realized he was heading for the school, I knew what he intended." The implications sank in slowly. "You saved my life. Again." Isaac's expression was grim as he looked at the fallen outlaw. He was the leader, the one who ordered the others to kill everyone on that stagecoach. Josephine followed his gaze, feeling a complex mixture of relief, vindication, and lingering fear. "Is he dead?" Isaac confirmed. "No doubt about it." The schoolhouse door opened again as curious townspeople, drawn by the sound of gunfire, began to gather. The sheriff pushed through the crowd, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. "Blackwell," he said, recognizing the dead man. "Came looking for revenge, did he?" Isaac nodded, still keeping Josephine close to his side. "Caught him threatening Miss Edwards at gunpoint." The sheriff addressed the growing crowd. "Nothing to see here, folks. Deputy Porters handled the situation." To Isaac, he added, "Get Miss Edwards somewhere safe. I'll take care of this mess." Isaac needed no further encouragement. With one arm still protectively around Josephine's shoulders, he guided her through the crowd and toward her cottage. The short walk passed in a blur. Josephine was only vaguely aware of concerned faces and murmured sympathies as they passed. Inside her small home, the reality of what had nearly happened finally hit her. Her legs gave way and Isaac caught her before she could fall, guiding her gently to a chair. "Easy now," he soothed, kneeling before her. "You're safe. It's over." "Is it?" Josephine asked, her voice trembling. First the stagecoach, now this. Will I ever truly be safe? Isaac took her cold hands in his warm ones. Blackwell was the last. With him gone, the gang will scatter. They won't risk coming after you again. She wanted desperately to believe him, but fear had sunk its claws too deeply. How can you be sure? Because I won't let anything happen to you, Isaac declared, his blue eyes fierce with determination. Not now, not ever. The intensity of his promise broke through Josephine's shock. Tears spilled down her cheeks as weeks of accumulated trauma finally found release. Isaac gathered her into his arms, holding her as she sobbed against his shoulder, his hand stroking her back in soothing circles. I'm sorry, she managed between tears. I should be stronger than this. You're the strongest person I know, Isaac countered. Surviving what you have, still choosing to stay, to teach, to build a life here that takes extraordinary courage. His words, spoken with such conviction, gradually calmed her. When her tears finally subsided, Josephine found herself still wrapped in Isaac's embrace, his heart beating steady and strong beneath her cheek. I should make tea, she said, reluctant to move but aware of propriety. They were alone in her home, unchaperoned, in a position that would scandalize Boston society. Isaac seemed to realize the same, slowly releasing her and rising to his feet. I'll build up your fire first, he said, moving to the small hearth. As he worked, Josephine washed her face and put water on to boil. The simple domestic tasks helped restore her equilibrium, though her hands still trembled slightly. Martha will likely be here soon, Isaac commented as he added wood to the growing flames. News travels fast in Gila City. As if summoned by his words, a knock sounded at the door, but when Josephine opened it, she found not Martha but the sheriff. Miss Edwards, he greeted her, hat in hand. Glad to see you're recovering from the ordeal. May I come in for a moment? Josephine stepped aside, allowing him entry. The sheriff nodded to Isaac, who had risen at his entrance. Thought you should both know, the sheriff said without preamble. We found Blackwell's horse tied up behind the saloon. Saddlebags contained a fair amount of money, likely his share from the stage robbery. Given the circumstances, it seems only right it should go to you, Miss Edwards, as restitution. Josephine blinked in surprise. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it, the sheriff advised. Use it for the school or for yourself. God knows you've earned it after what those men put you through. There's something else you should consider, Isaac added, his expression thoughtful. With Blackwell's death made public, any remaining gang members will know for certain you can identify them. It might be safer if word got around that you'd left Gila City, at least for a while. Leave? Josephine echoed, dismayed. But the school, not really leave, the sheriff clarified. Just let folks think you have. Stay out of sight for a couple weeks, maybe at the Johnson place. By then, any of Blackwell's associates will have moved on to safer territories. The idea of hiding, of interrupting the school term she'd just begun, didn't sit well with Josephine. Yet she understood the logic behind it. The children need consistency, she argued. I can't just disappear after a single day of teaching. We could say you were called east on family business, Isaac suggested. Mrs. Johnson taught before she married. She could step in temporarily. He moved closer, his voice softening. Josephine, please. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because we didn't take proper precautions. The genuine concern in his eyes swayed her where logic had not. 2 weeks, she conceded. No more. That should be sufficient, the sheriff agreed, settling his hat back on his head. I'll have Deputy Porter bring the money by tomorrow, once we've counted it proper. With a nod to them both, he took his leave. Alone again with Isaac, Josephine sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the day's events. Will it ever be truly over? She wondered aloud. Isaac knelt beside her chair, taking her hands once more. "Yes," he said firmly, "and when it is, you'll have your school, your students, your life here in Gila City." He paused, then added softly, "And if you want it, you'll have me too." Josephine's eyes widened at the implication of his words. "Isaac, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know we've only just begun to know each other, but today, when I saw Blackwell pointing his gun at you, I realized I couldn't imagine my life without you in it." His hands tightened around hers. "I'm not asking for an answer now, just think about it, about us, about what might be possible when all this is behind us." The kettle whistled, breaking the moment. Josephine rose to tend to it, her mind whirling with the enormity of what Isaac was suggesting. Marriage for that was surely what he meant had always been part of her distant future plans. But marriage to a frontier lawman in a town barely established, thousands of miles from everything familiar. And yet, as she prepared the tea, Josephine found herself not rejecting the idea outright but considering it. Considering him. His steady presence, his unwavering support, his respect for her independence even as he sought to protect her. "I will think about it," she promised as she handed him a cup. "When this is over, when I'm teaching again and life has found its rhythm, we'll talk about the future." The smile that lit Isaac's face was worth any uncertainty she felt. They sat before the fire, drinking tea and discussing practical arrangements for her temporary disappearance, both aware that something fundamental had shifted between them, a promise of possibilities neither had imagined just weeks before. The following morning, Martha arrived at Josephine's cottage with news that arrangements had been made. Josephine would stay at the Johnson farm, about 5 miles outside town, ostensibly having departed on the morning stage back east due to a family emergency. Martha would teach in her absence, and Isaac would bring messages and supplies as needed. "It's all quite dramatic," Martha commented as she helped Josephine pack essentials. "Like something from one of those dime novels my husband pretends not to read." Despite the gravity of the situation, Josephine found herself smiling. "I never imagined my life in the West would involve quite so much intrigue." "Adventure finds those meant for it," Martha said with surprising wisdom. "And you, my dear, were clearly meant for adventure and perhaps for our deputy as well." Josephine felt her cheeks warm. "We're exploring possibilities," she admitted. Martha's knowing smile spoke volumes. "He's a good man, the best I know aside from my Johnson. Steady, honorable, and not hard on the eyes either." "Martha," Josephine exclaimed, embarrassed but unable to disagree. The older woman laughed. "Just stating facts, dear. Now let's get you to the farm before too many people are about." They slipped out the back way, where a wagon waited with Martha's husband holding the reins. The journey to the Johnson farm passed pleasantly enough, with Mr. Johnson sharing stories of Gila City's early days and Martha pointing out local landmarks. The farm itself was modest, but well kept: a small house, a barn, and several outbuildings surrounded by fields of corn and vegetables. A few cattle grazed in a pasture beyond. "It's lovely," Josephine said sincerely as Mr. Johnson showed her to a small but comfortable guest room. "Been in my family since '49, he said proudly. "Not much compared to Eastern standards, but it's home." "It's perfect," Josephine assured him. The first few days of her self-imposed exile passed slowly. Josephine helped Martha with household chores, read books borrowed from the Johnsons' small collection, and began planning future lessons for when she could return to teaching. In the evenings, the three of them would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. Isaac visited daily, ostensibly as part of his regular patrols but lingering longer each time. He brought news from town: how Martha was managing with the students, gossip about Blackwell's dramatic demise, updates on the search for remaining gang members. 5 days into her stay, Isaac arrived with unexpected news. "We caught another one," he announced as they walked together near the edge of the property, far enough from the house for privacy. "One of Blackwell's men trying to sell stolen goods in Tucson. He confirmed what we suspected. The rest of the gang has scattered, most headed for Mexico or California." "That's wonderful news," Josephine said, relief washing through her. "Does that mean I can return to teaching sooner than planned?" Isaac hesitated. "Sheriff still thinks it best to wait the full 2 weeks, just to be certain. But yes, it's looking more and more like this nightmare is truly ending." They stopped beneath the spreading branches of an old cottonwood tree. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, turning Isaac's features to bronze as he turned to face her. "I've missed seeing you in town," he admitted. "The schoolhouse feels empty without you." "I've missed being there," Josephine replied, "though the Johnsons have been wonderful hosts. They think highly of you. Everyone does." Isaac took a step closer. "Especially me." The intensity in his blue eyes made Josephine's pulse quicken. Over the past days, she'd found herself thinking of him constantly, his smile, his voice, the feel of his arms around her. What had begun as gratitude and admiration had deepened into something she could no longer deny, even to herself. "Isaac," she began, gathering her courage, "what you said before about us, about possibilities." His expression grew serious, attentive. "Yes, I've been thinking about it." "A great deal." Josephine took a deep breath. "When I came west, I was seeking independence, a chance to define myself beyond the constraints of Boston society. I never expected to find love." The word hung in the air between them, momentous in its simplicity. Isaac's breath visibly caught. "Are you saying—" he began, hope evident in his voice. "I'm saying that I care for you," Josephine continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "More than I thought possible in such a short time. And when this is over, when I can return to my teaching and my life here, I would very much like to explore what might be possible between us." The joy that spread across Isaac's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He reached for her hands, drawing her closer. "Josephine Edwards," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since I found you standing alone on that desert road, brave despite everything you'd endured. I will wait as long as you need, court you properly, prove myself worthy of your affection." "You already have," Josephine whispered, raising one hand to touch his cheek. "You've shown me what true strength looks like, not domination or control, but protection, respect, partnership." Isaac turned his face to press a kiss to her palm, then drew her fully into his embrace. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like both a promise and a beginning, tender yet passionate. Speaking of possibilities neither had imagined when fate first brought them together on a blood-soaked road in the Arizona wilderness. When they finally parted, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of purple and blue. Isaac kept one arm around Josephine's waist as they walked back toward the farmhouse, both aware that something profound had shifted between them, a commitment not yet formalized, but no less real for its newness. "I should return to town before full dark," Isaac said reluctantly when they reached the house. "But I'll be back tomorrow." "I'll be waiting," Josephine promised, her smile reflecting the joy she saw in his eyes. As she watched him ride away, Josephine felt a sense of peace settling over her. The trauma of her arrival in Arizona would always be part of her story, but it would not define her future. That future, bright with promise and possibility, stretched before her now, and for the first time since the stagecoach attack, she looked toward it with unalloyed hope. The remaining days of Josephine's exile passed more quickly. brightened by Isaac's daily visits and the growing certainty of their feelings for each other. When the agreed-upon 2 weeks finally concluded, it was Isaac who came to bring her back to town, his pride evident as he helped her into the wagon beside him. "The whole town's buzzing about your return," he told her as they traveled the familiar road to Gila City. "The children especially. Martha's done her best, but she says they ask for Miss Edwards every day." Josephine's heart warmed at the thought. "I've missed them too, all of them." "There's something else you should know," Isaac added, a hint of mischief in his expression. "That money the sheriff gave you, the restitution from Blackwell, the town councils voted to match it, earmarked specifically for school improvements." "Truly," Josephine turned to him in surprise. "But that's a significant sum." "They value education," Isaac explained. "And they value you. This is their way of showing it." Tears pricked at Josephine's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," Isaac replied, his voice softening. "Not just for the school term, but permanently. Make Gila City your home." The wagon crested a small hill, bringing the town into view. It looked different to Josephine now, not the rough frontier settlement she'd first seen, but a community with promise, with heart, with a future she could help shape. "I already have," she said simply, her hand finding Isaac's on the bench between them. His answering smile was worth all the trials that had brought her to this moment. Word of Josephine's return spread quickly as they entered town. Children ran alongside the wagon, calling greetings. Women waved from porches and storefronts. By the time they reached the schoolhouse, a small crowd had gathered to welcome her back. Martha emerged from the building, beaming with pleasure. "Thank heavens you're back," she declared, embracing Josephine warmly. "These young ones have nearly worn me to the bone with their questions and energy." The children clustered around, each eager to share what they'd learned in her absence or to present small tokens of welcome wildflowers. A polished stone, a crudely drawn but heartfelt picture of the schoolhouse with Miss Edwards written beneath it in uneven letters. Overwhelmed by their enthusiasm, Josephine found herself laughing and crying simultaneously. "I've missed you all terribly," she told them, kneeling to be at eye level with the youngest. "And I promise I won't leave again if I can help it." Her gaze found Isaac's over the children's heads. The tenderness in his expression made her heart swell with emotion. Whatever the future held, she was no longer facing it alone. That evening, after the excitement of her return had subsided and she'd settled back into her cottage, Isaac came calling properly, hat in hand, freshly shaved, wearing his best suit despite the lack of any special occasion. "May I come in?" he asked formally, though his eyes danced with private amusement at the ceremony of it all. Josephine ushered him inside, equally aware of the shift in their relationship from rescuer, and rescued to something much more deliberate and meaningful. "I've brought you something," Isaac said, producing a small package from his pocket. "A welcome home gift." Josephine unwrapped it carefully to find a small silver pendant on a delicate chain, a heart intertwined with what appeared to be a protective shield. "It's beautiful," she breathed, touching it gently. "The silversmith in Tucson made it to my design," Isaac explained. "The shield is for protection, the heart for, well, I think that's clear enough." Josephine looked up at him, her eyes bright with emotion. "Will you put it on for me?" He stepped behind her, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck as he fastened the clasp. The pendant settled just below the hollow of her throat, cool against her skin. When she turned to face him again, Isaac took both her hands in his. "Josephine Edwards," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I know we've known each other only briefly in time's reckoning, but in experience and understanding, in feeling I believe we've shared more than most couples do in years." Josephine nodded, unable to deny the truth of his words. The trauma they'd weathered together, the connection forged through danger and rescue, had created a bond deeper than ordinary courtship might have achieved. "I love you," Isaac continued simply. "I want to build a life with you not just as your protector, but as your partner. I want to support your teaching, your dreams for the school. I want to create a home with you, perhaps a family someday, if that's your wish too." Though she had expected this moment might come, the reality of it still took Josephine's breath away. The young woman who had left Boston seeking independence now found herself considering a proposal of marriage not as a surrender of that independence, but as an extension of it, a sharing of strength with a man who valued her for precisely the qualities that had brought her west. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Deputy Porter?" she managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I believe I am, Miss Edwards." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small ring with a modest diamond that caught the lamplight. "Will you marry me, Josephine? Make Gila City our home together?" The answer rose to her lips without hesitation or doubt. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." His face lit with such joy that Josephine felt her heart might burst with answering happiness. He slid the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace that made her laugh with delight. When he set her down again, his expression grew serious once more. "I want you to know," he said earnestly, "that I don't expect you to give up teaching when we marry. This town needs you in that schoolhouse as much as I need you in my life." The deliberate acknowledgement of her vocation touched Josephine deeply. "Thank you for understanding how important it is to me. I wouldn't want to change anything about you," Isaac declared. "Your determination to make your own way is part of what I love." They sealed their engagement with a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, one built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and a love born in adversity, but destined to flourish in peace. News of their engagement spread through Gila City with predictable speed. Most reactions were enthusiastically positive. A few older residents muttered about the hasty nature of the courtship, but even they couldn't deny the obvious devotion between the deputy and the schoolteacher. Martha Johnson appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, her practical frontier sensibilities balanced by a romantic streak that delighted in planning what would be the social event of the season. The date was set for Christmas Eve, giving them 3 months to prepare, long enough to be proper, short enough to keep Isaac from pining himself to death, as Martha put it. Those months passed in a whirlwind of activity. By day, Josephine taught her growing number of students, implementing improvements to the curriculum, and the schoolhouse itself with the funds that had been allocated. By evening, she and Isaac courted properly, taking walks through town, attending church socials, and occasionally riding out to favorite spots in the surrounding countryside. On weekends, they worked together on the small house Isaac had purchased on the edge of town, a 2-story structure with enough room for future children, and, at Josephine's insistence, a dedicated study where she could prepare lessons and eventually write the educational texts she'd begun to envision. "It's not what you were used to in Boston," Isaac said apologetically as they painted the parlor a warm yellow shade. "It's better," Josephine replied truthfully, "because we're building it together." As their wedding day approached, a letter arrived from Josephine's parents, their first communication since her departure from Boston. The letter was cautious but not unkind, expressing concern over her safety following the stagecoach attack, news of which had reached Eastern papers, and guarded curiosity about her engagement to a frontier lawman. "They're trying," Josephine told Isaac after sharing the contents with him. In their own way. Will you wish them to attend the wedding? He asked, careful to keep any judgment from his voice. Josephine considered the question seriously. I'll invite them, but I don't expect they'll come. The journey is long and winter travel difficult. She paused. Does that disappoint you? Isaac shook his head. This is your day, our day. Whoever is meant to share it with us will be there. His understanding, as always, reinforced Josephine's certainty that she had found a truly exceptional man. To her surprise, her parents replied promptly to her invitation, declining as expected but enclosing a generous check as a wedding gift and, more importantly, their blessing. We may not understand the path you've chosen, her mother wrote, but we cannot deny that your letters reflect a happiness we've never before seen in you. If this deputy porter is the cause, then he has our gratitude and our welcome into the family. Christmas Eve arrived crisp and clear, the winter air cool but not bitter, the desert landscape transformed by a rare dusting of snow that had fallen the previous day. The small church was decorated with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and dozens of candles that cast a warm, golden glow over the assembled guests. As Martha helped her with the final touches of her wedding ensemble, a cream-colored dress with lace trim, her mother's cameo brooch at her throat alongside Isaac's pendant, Josephine felt a profound sense of rightness. The journey that had brought her to this day had been marked by tragedy and terror, yet it led to joy she could never have anticipated. You look beautiful, Martha declared, adjusting the wreath of winter berries and small white flowers that crowned Josephine's upswept hair. Isaac won't know what hit him, Josephine laughed. I hope he recognizes me enough to say I do. Oh, he'll say it all right, Martha assured her. That man has been counting the days like a prisoner awaiting release. The small joke eased Josephine's wedding day nerves. She took a deep breath, smoothing her skirts one final time. I'm ready. The church fell silent as Josephine entered on the arm of Mr. Johnson, who had graciously offered to stand in for her absent father. The faces of her students, her neighbors, her friends all turned to watch her progress down the aisle. But Josephine had eyes only for Isaac, standing tall and handsome before the altar, his expression one of wonder and adoration as he beheld his bride. When Mr. Johnson placed her hand in Isaac's, Josephine felt a sense of completion, as if a circle begun on that blood-soaked desert road had finally closed, transforming trauma into triumph, fear into faith, isolation into belonging. The minister's words washed over her familiar phrases about love and honor, commitment and partnership. When the time came to speak her vows, Josephine's voice rang clear and confident through the church. I, Josephine, take you, Isaac, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Isaac's answering vows were spoken with equal conviction, his blue eyes never leaving hers as he promised his lifelong devotion. When he slid the simple gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady and sure. By the power vested in me, the minister concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. The kiss they shared was brief but tender, mindful of their audience yet conveying the depth of their feelings. As they turned to face the congregation, now introduced as Deputy and Mrs. Porter, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed at the town hall was joyous and lively, with music, dancing, and a feast to which everyone in Gila City had contributed something. Josephine and Isaac moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, their hands rarely separating throughout the evening. Happy? Isaac asked softly during a quiet moment as they watched the dancers. Josephine looked up at her husband, the words still new and wonderful in her mind. Beyond measure, she replied honestly. Are you? His answer came not in words but in the tender kiss he pressed to her forehead, the gentle squeeze of his hand around hers, the love shining unguarded in his eyes. As midnight approached, they slipped away from the celebration, which showed no signs of concluding despite the late hour. Isaac had arranged for a carriage to take them to their new home, now fully furnished and waiting for them to begin their life together. Standing in the doorway, Isaac surprised Josephine by sweeping her into his arms. Tradition, he explained with a grin as he carried her over the threshold. Inside, a fire had been lit in the hearth, casting warm light throughout the downstairs rooms. Candles glowed on tables and shelves, their light reflecting off the polished wood floors. It was simple but beautiful, exactly the home Josephine had envisioned. "Welcome home, Mrs. Porter," Isaac said softly as he set her on her feet. "It's perfect," Josephine whispered, emotion welling in her throat. "All of it. This house, this day, you." Isaac drew her into his arms, his expression suddenly serious. "When I found you on that road, I thought I was saving you, but the truth is, Josephine, you saved me too. From loneliness, from a life half-lived." His voice grew husky with emotion. "You are the bravest, most remarkable woman I've ever known, and I will spend every day of our lives together making sure you never regret choosing to build your future with me." Tears of happiness filled Josephine's eyes. "I already know I won't," she assured him, rising on tiptoe to seal her words with a kiss. As Christmas Eve gave way to Christmas Day, husband and wife discovered the depth and breadth of their love for each other, a love forged in danger but destined to flourish in peace, a love that would withstand whatever challenges life might bring their way, a love that had begun with 7 simple words spoken in a moment of crisis. "You're safe now." And she was. 5 years later, the April sun filtered through the classroom windows, casting golden rectangles on the polished wooden floor. Josephine Porter moved among her students, 28 of them now, observing their work on the composition assignment she'd given. The Gila City School had grown along with the town itself, which had blossomed into a respectable settlement of nearly 500 souls. Mrs. Porter, 6-year-old Emma Thompson, tugged at her skirt. "I can't make my letters stay on the line." Josephine knelt beside the child, guiding her small hand. "Like this, Emma, slow and steady." Emma was the daughter of the stagecoach driver who had died in the robbery that had brought Josephine to Gila City. His widow had remarried 2 years ago, and Emma had blossomed under the care of her stepfather. It gave Josephine particular satisfaction to teach her, a living connection to the past that had shaped her own destiny. The school bell rang, signaling the end of the day. The children gathered their things with the usual excitement of freedom approaching. "Remember to complete your reading for tomorrow," Josephine called over the happy chaos. "And William, please tell your mother that the school board approved her proposal for the library addition." William Miller, the doctor's son and one of her brightest pupils, nodded seriously. "Yes, Mrs. Porter, Pa says it's about time we had a proper library." As the last student departed, Josephine began straightening the classroom, a task that took longer these days as her expanding figure made bending difficult. At 7 months pregnant with their second child, she had developed a new appreciation for the practical frontier dresses she had once considered unstylish. The sound of footsteps in the doorway made her look up from gathering fallen pencils. Isaac stood there, their 3-year-old son Matthew perched on his shoulders. "There are my favorite men," Josephine said warmly, straightening with some effort. Isaac crossed the room to kiss her cheek, then swung Matthew down. The boy immediately ran to his mother, wrapping his arms around her legs. "Mama, Papa took me to see the new horses at the livery. Did he now?" Josephine ruffled her son's dark hair so like his father's. "And were they very fine horses?" "The finest," Isaac confirmed, his smile still capable of quickening Josephine's heart after 5 years of marriage. "Almost as fine as the news I bring." Josephine raised an eyebrow. "What news?" "The town council approved it," Isaac said, unable to contain his excitement. "Unanimous vote. Gila City will have its academy." For a moment, Josephine could only stare at him in shock. The Gila City Academy for Higher Learning had been her dream for nearly 3 years, a proper school that would allow local children to continue their education beyond the basics, without traveling to Tucson or Phoenix. She had presented the proposal to the council just last week, expecting months of deliberation. "Already," she managed finally. "But how?" Isaac grinned. "Seems the council had already been discussing the need. Your proposal just gave them the framework they needed." His eyes shone with pride. "They want you to serve as headmistress, with authority to hire additional teachers as needed." Joy bubbled up within Josephine. "But the timing with the baby coming." "Construction won't begin until fall," Isaac assured her. "And they understand you'll need time with our new addition before taking on additional responsibilities. Martha's already volunteered to step in as temporary teacher for your maternity leave." Matthew, growing bored with adult conversation, had wandered to the bookshelf and was carefully examining a picture book. Josephine watched him fondly before turning back to her husband. "I can hardly believe it," she admitted. "When I came here, I only hoped to establish myself as a competent teacher. I never imagined—" "I did," Isaac said softly, drawing her into his arms. "From the moment I found you on that road, I knew you would change this town, change all of us for the better." Josephine leaned into his embrace, grateful as always for his steadfast support. Sheriff Porter now, he had assumed the role 2 years prior. When his predecessor retired, Isaac had proven himself not just an effective lawman, but a progressive voice in the growing community. "We've built something wonderful here," she murmured. "Together," Isaac agreed, his hand coming to rest on the swell of her belly where their second child grew. "Just as we promised." Their moment was interrupted by Matthew's excited voice. "Papa, Mama, look what I found." He held up a small leather-bound book, Josephine's journal from her first year in Gila City. She had thought it lost in one of their moves. "What a treasure," Isaac said, taking it carefully. "This is the story of how your mama came to Gila City and how we found each other." Matthew's eyes widened with interest. "Will you read it to me?" Isaac looked to Josephine for permission. She nodded, though she felt a momentary pang at the thought of her son learning about the violence that had marked her arrival. "Perhaps not all of it just yet," she suggested. "But someday, when you're older, you'll understand what brought us all together." "A very brave lady," Isaac told Matthew, lifting him into his arms, "who survived when others couldn't, who built a new life in a strange place, and who taught all of us the true meaning of courage." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes at her husband's words. "And a very brave deputy," she added, "who promised a frightened young woman that she was safe and kept that promise every day since." As they left the schoolhouse together, a family created against all odds from tragedy and chance, Josephine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The stagecoach robbery had nearly ended her life before her Western adventure could truly begin. Instead, it had led her to Isaac, to motherhood, to a purpose greater than she had ever imagined for herself. The Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues as they walked home, Matthew chattering between them, the future growing within her. Josephine Porter, once the sole survivor of a brutal attack, was now surrounded by love, purpose, and community proof that even from the darkest beginnings, the most beautiful stories could unfold. And she was, indeed, safe now not just from physical danger, but from the fears that had once constrained her, from the limitations others had tried to impose, from the doubt that had nearly sent her fleeing back to Boston after the attack. In finding her courage, she had found everything else that mattered. As Isaac's hand found hers, warm and strong and constant, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be.